Sigmund Freud was not only the creator of psychoanalysis, but a tireless explorer of the most hidden and complex aspects of the human mind. Born in 1856 in Freiburg, in what was then the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Freud was raised in a Jewish family steeped in rigid religious traditions and deep-rooted customs. However, his questioning and restless nature soon made him challenge these religious teachings from a young age. Despite his strict upbringing, Freud never fully identified with his religious heritage, and over the years he became a fierce critic of religious institutions as a whole. His academic career began in medicine, specifically neurology, but Freud quickly became interested in the mysteries of the human psyche, dedicating himself to exploring the unconscious. In his research, he realized that many behaviors considered inexplicable or irrational were directly linked to hidden mental processes, often influenced by unconscious fears and desires. Freud understood that religions were no exception to this phenomenon, perceiving in them something far beyond beliefs or cultural traditions. He saw in them a clear symptom of the inner conflicts of the human psyche. In notorious works such as The Future of an Illusion and Moses and Monotheism, Freud argues precisely that religious belief acts as a kind of defense mechanism, a psychological response to existential anguish and uncertainty. He believed that faced with the chaos and unpredictability of life, human beings instinctively seek emotional refuge, creating and projecting divine figures as entities capable of providing comfort, security, and explanations for the most difficult and painful questions about existence. An example of this, according to Freud, would be in the conception of the figure of God as an idealized father, a protective authority who can offer emotional security in times of crisis and helplessness. Just as a small child looks to its parents for protection and guidance, Freud realized that the adult human being transfers these emotional needs to the divine sphere, seeking a perfect father figure who not only protects but also guides morally and establishes clear rules in a chaotic and unpredictable universe. For this reason, Freud did not treat religion merely as a simplistic deception or a rational error. He defined religion as a powerful illusion, sustained by deep, unconscious desires. Within psychoanalysis, an illusion doesn't just mean a mistake or a deliberate lie, but a deeply rooted desire projected onto reality. In this way, he sought to understand not whether God exists or not, but why people need to believe in something greater and more powerful than themselves, revealing how religious faith meets complex and deep emotional needs. The Freudian approach radically transformed the traditional understanding of religion, presenting it as a collective psychic creation, a desperate but understandable human attempt to deal with the unknown, suffering, and death. His aim was not to destroy or belittle faith, but to invite people to critically reflect on the emotional role religion plays in their lives and what emotional and existential voids it seeks to fill. In doing so, Freud brought to light a profound reflection on our relationship with religious beliefs, paving the way for a broader understanding of the human motivations behind faith. Faith in the divine, according to Freud's perspective, is essentially an extension of the emotional relationships experienced during childhood, especially in the dynamic with parents, projected onto a cosmic scale. This view offers a profound insight into how human beings deal with their emotional needs throughout life. Freud believed that this dependence on a superior figure prevents full psychological maturation, keeping people in a permanent state of emotional infantility, unable to fully face the complexities of adult life. According to Freud, when someone depends excessively on an external authority, in this case, God, to define their purpose and meaning, they end up renouncing full responsibility for their own existence. In this way, the individual remains stuck in a phase of infantile emotional development, unable to accept and deal with the uncertainties inherent in the human condition. Instead of facing the harsh realities of life, such as the inevitability of death and the absence of a clearly defined purpose, they prefer to cling to the comforting promise of transcendental meaning and constant care from a higher entity. This dynamic is not just an individual trait, but something deeply rooted in the collective psyche. Freud didn't see this self-deception as something benign or simply harmless. On the contrary, he claimed that this emotional dependence on religious beliefs generates a series of psychological limitations that prevent humanity from achieving true emotional and intellectual autonomy. Instead of being free to explore the world and its possibilities with courage and curiosity, people remain trapped in a mental structure that offers them illusory security, but which also profoundly restricts their emotional and intellectual freedom. In The Malaise in Culture, Freud expands on this critique by explicitly comparing religious practices to a type of collective, obsessive-compulsive disorder. In the same way that neurotic people adopt rituals such as repeatedly washing their hands or constantly checking locks to relieve anxiety, religions establish rituals such as prayers, sacrifices, and ceremonies that seek to assuage humanity's deepest fears and existential anxieties. These religious rituals therefore have a clear psychological function. They are mechanisms that seek to keep impulses and desires that are considered dangerous or socially unacceptable under control. Religion, from this perspective, not only serves to give meaning to existence, but also functions as a sophisticated form of social and psychological control. It promotes the repression of certain natural impulses, using concepts such as sin, guilt, and divine punishment as tools to keep specific behaviors under control. Freud emphasizes that this control does not eliminate unwanted impulses, but only temporarily represses them, creating constant tension within the individual. The result is a permanent internal struggle in which natural desires and impulses have to be continually masked under a veil of religious morality and constant guilt. This situation generates an intense and long-lasting psychological conflict, where the individual often experiences feelings of inadequacy, guilt, and anxiety for desiring things considered inappropriate or forbidden by religious morality. Freud considered this continuous repression and the resulting feeling of guilt to be deeply damaging to people's emotional and mental health, preventing them from living fully and authentically. His criticism of religion, therefore, was not superficial or simply provocative, but sought to bring to light an essential reflection on the emotional and psychological costs of religious faith. For Freud, religion was not just an individual psychological mechanism, but also a complex social control structure that profoundly influences relationships and collective behavior. In The Future of An Illusion, he explains in detail how religion, throughout history, has been used as a powerful tool to shape and control entire societies, establishing what is permitted and forbidden through the promise of paradise and the threat of hell. These beliefs have a huge psychological impact because they operate from a system of reward and punishment that transcends earthly existence. Freud argues that this mechanism is extremely effective because, unlike man-made laws, which can be questioned or changed, religious dogmas present themselves as absolute and immutable truths. This gives religion a unique power to influence not only actions, but also the thoughts, feelings, and fundamental values of individuals. By believing that an omnipresent and omniscient entity is constantly watching their actions, people internalize surveillance, making self-censorship more powerful and effective than any external control, such as laws or traditional policing. This dynamic of internal control reinforces rigid and hierarchical social structures, making it easier for religious or political leaders to maintain power and appropriate these beliefs to justify their actions and decisions. Freud noted that throughout history, religion has often been used as a moral justification for wars, persecutions, and cultural impositions. Historical examples such as the Crusades, the Inquisition, and countless other conflicts clearly demonstrate the use of religious beliefs to mobilize masses around specific, often violent or oppressive goals. In addition, Freud realized that religious control over thought prevents the full development of individuals' critical capacity. When religious dogmas are presented as absolute truths, questioning and independent thinking become subversive, dangerous, and often punishable as heresy. This significantly limits people's ability to think freely and explore the world around them with genuine curiosity and intellectual openness. The direct psychological consequence of this situation, according to Freud, is the permanent infantilization of individuals. By constantly relying on divine guidance to determine right and wrong, people remain in a state of emotional dependence similar to that of a child who incessantly seeks approval and guidance from their parents. Freud believed that this dependency undermines individuals' ability to take full responsibility for their own lives and decisions, limiting their emotional and intellectual maturity. By maintaining this infantilized dynamic, religion reinforces the constant need for a superior figure to offer answers, protection, and consolation. However, for Freud, this represents a profound psychological and social limitation. The individual who passively accepts religious explanations about life, death, and suffering gives up the possibility of constructing a personal, authentic, and critical vision of reality, becoming trapped in a structure that promises emotional security but limits their intellectual and emotional freedom. Freud therefore did not see religion merely as a personal belief or a matter of faith, but as an institution deeply intertwined with the dynamics of social and psychological power. His critique was not superficial or simply provocative. On the contrary, it was a deep and careful analysis of how religious structures profoundly shape human consciousness and social relations, often to the detriment of individuals' personal autonomy and critical capacity. For Freud, accepting reality without resorting to comforting beliefs or the idea of a higher entity was one of the greatest challenges of human existence. Life, according to him, had no predetermined or transcendental meaning. It was, in essence, chaotic, unpredictable, and indifferent to individual suffering and anguish. Fully accepting this reality would require significant emotional and intellectual courage, a willingness to face discomfort and uncertainty without the comforting aid of faith. Freud believed that despite the comfort that religion could provide, it ended up robbing the individual of the opportunity to mature emotionally. In Freud's view, true maturity involves the ability to face life with all its uncertainties and contradictions, fully accepting responsibility for one's own choices without delegating it to an external or divine force. Faith, therefore, while offering immediate emotional refuge, also profoundly limits the human capacity to take full responsibility for one's own existence and choices. Freedom, for Freud, does not lie in adherence to externally established rules and dogmas, but in the ability to clearly understand the internal and external forces that shape our behavior, and, based on this awareness, to make autonomous and conscious choices. Freud argued that religion, although it appears to provide a solid and definitive moral guide, in practice restricts the development of authentic personal ethics. By accepting a morality imposed from outside, individuals put aside the process of critical reflection necessary to build a truly personal ethical system that is coherent with their own inner experiences and values. Freud was fully aware of the difficulty involved in this process. Rejecting the comfort of religious certainties means facing life without pre-established guarantees, and this can be terrifying. The idea that our actions are not governed by a greater destiny or purpose, but are the direct result of our personal choices and responsibilities, implies taking on a significant weight. Many people prefer not to carry this weight, opting instead for the emotional security offered by the belief that their lives are part of a larger, divinely orchestrated plan. In this sense, religion is seen as a system that offers a secure but limiting structure, while at the same time promising supposed emotional tranquility. Freud clearly understood the seductive power of these religious promises, but he was also convinced that by accepting them without question, the individual was giving up their deepest autonomy. For Freud, living with autonomy implies being willing to face constant uncertainty, accepting that there is no guarantee of reward or punishment beyond the immediate consequences of one's actions and decisions. In this way, the concept of freedom defended by Freud was not synonymous with the absence of rules, but with full awareness of the reasons that lead us to act in a certain way. He believed that only when we fully understand the internal and external forces that condition us can we make truly free choices. Religion, by limiting this understanding and imposing absolute truths from outside, compromises this process of deep self-knowledge. Therefore, for Freud, achieving emotional maturity meant more than simply rejecting religious beliefs. It also meant adopting an active and critical stance towards life, being willing to build your own values based on direct personal experience, honest reflection, and courageously facing the inevitable uncertainties of human existence. The big question Freud poses is clear and challenging. Are we really willing to give up the comforting security of religious beliefs in order to face reality head-on in all its complexity and uncertainty? According to him, religion represents not only an illusion or a mechanism of social control, but above all a profound and understandable manifestation of human fear in the face of the unknown. Freud believed that people incessantly seek definitive answers to existential questions, such as the meaning of suffering, the reason for existence, or the reality of death. The promise of a protective God who gives meaning to everything that happens is too powerful a consolation to be easily abandoned. Even in the face of rational questioning and scientific developments that often challenge traditional religious dogmas, faith persists precisely because it meets this fundamental human need for security and order. Freud understood that it is not simply a question of abandoning a belief or tradition, but of giving up a psychological support that is deeply rooted in our emotional and social history. Ultimately, attachment to religion reflects a natural resistance to change and authentic psychological maturation, which requires accepting life as a fundamentally uncertain and unpredictable experience. Freud, however, did not simply propose the destruction of religion as a solution, but advocated a more conscious and critical approach to it. His aim was not to replace religion with a new form of belief or another comforting illusion, but to encourage deep reflection on why we feel such a need for something transcendent. For him, understanding the emotional voids that faith fills in our lives is essential for developing emotional and intellectual autonomy. It's not just a question of abandoning religious belief, but of deeply questioning and understanding the role it plays in our psychological and social lives. Freud's most powerful provocation perhaps lies in the idea that by abandoning religion, we become fully responsible for our destiny and choices. There would no longer be a divine figure to turn to or blame for the events of our lives, only ourselves, with all our contradictions, decisions, and their consequences. This may sound terrifying, and indeed it is, but Freud believed that only when we take full responsibility for our existence can we achieve true emotional and intellectual freedom. In this sense, true maturity does not consist in finding definitive and absolute answers, but in accepting that many questions may never have definitive solutions. Growing up, according to Freud, means giving up comforting certainties and facing life with courage, humility, and a willingness to constantly doubt. If you've made it this far and this reflection has brought you clarity or helped you see new perspectives, I'd like to ask you something important. Like this video and subscribe to the channel to follow more content like this. And if what we discussed today about Freud and emotional freedom made sense to you, please also consider supporting the channel with whatever amount you think is fair. Your help strengthens this work and allows more in-depth and enlightening content to reach even more people. Reflection on our deepest values is only possible with the participation and support of each and every one of you. Thank you very much for following along, and see you in the next video.